I at the center of experience, the nebulous notion of an I as the agent of activity. Okay, then for the ignorant, undiluted person, because this notion I am is constantly present in the background of all experience, when one starts to reflect on that, one takes the I am for granted and tries to figure out, this is when you start getting philosophical, what am I? Who am I? In my essence, what am I? And then one starts identifying the I am with something. And according to the Buddha, when one identifies the I, it's always identifying with one or another of the five aggregates. So one comes to the notion, or one posits the I in some relation to the five aggregates. So I am the body, or I possess the body. The I is something inside the body, or the body is within this great I. And so for feeling, perception, the mental activities, consciousness, one establishes a relationship between the I and the this, the content of the I. So I am this. That is where this concept or notion of a self emerges, when one gives a content to the vague, nebulous notion of I am. When one comes to the conclusion, I am this, this is myself. Okay, then when one comes to the idea of a self, then one faces the alternatives of what is the destination of the self, or the destiny, the future destiny. So then there are two alternatives here, and these set out what are called the two fundamental, extreme, wrong views according to Buddhism. That is eternalism, the idea that the self will exist, maintaining its identity for eternity, and annihilationism, the idea that at death the self is annihilated. And so we come to the conceivings, I shall be, that is, I shall exist forever, or I shall not be, that is, I'll be annihilated at death. Even Shakespeare had some inkling, to be or not to be, that is the question. Okay, then the next conceivings branch out when one takes takes the position, I shall be. So if one assumes I'm going to exist forever, then comes the question, how will I exist? In what particular mode will I exist? And so here the various alternatives are laid out. I shall be possessed of form, that is, I shall have a body forever, the resurrection of the body, and then eternity in a resurrected body. Or I shall be formless, without a body, just a pure spirit or soul existing forever. I shall be percipient, I shall have perception. I shall be non-percipient, without perception. I shall be neither percipient nor non-percipient. So these would represent different philosophical views that were being discussed amongst the philosophers at the time of the Buddha. Okay, so all of these, you could say, it's a whole accumulating mass of views and speculations and ideas, which are all emerging and developing out of that fundamental misconception that I am something real. And so the Buddha now says, Conceiving is a disease. Conceiving is a tumor or a boil. Conceiving is a dart. By overcoming all conceivings, that is, by getting rid of all of these deluded misconceptions, one is called a sage at peace. That is, getting rid of these misconceptions, not just through study, learning, reflection, but through wisdom, one reaches the ultimate goal, the full maturation of wisdom by which one sees into the truth of selflessness. And so this cuts off all the deluded notions right down to the base, the notion I am. And so without that notion of even of I am, then one is called, the Pali expression is Muni Santo, which is rendered the sage at peace. So we know Muni from Sakya Muni, which is the sage of the Sakyan clan. And then Santo is related to the word Santi. Shanti is Sanskrit, peace. So this is the peaceful sage. Okay, then comes a very beautiful passage. It says, okay, one is called a sage at peace, and the sage at peace is not born, does not age, does not die. He is not shaken and does not yearn. For there is nothing present in him by which he might be born. So that by which he might be born are the two roots of the cycle of rebirth. That is ignorance and craving. And now, since he's overcome ignorance and craving, there's nothing to drive on to new existence. So there is nothing present by which he might be born. Not being born, how could he grow old and age? Not aging, how could he die? Since there's no dying, how could he be shaken? Not being shaken, why should he yearn? And so then the Buddha sort of summed up and said it was with reference to this that it was said, the tides of conceiving do not sweep over one who stands on these foundations. And when the tides of conceiving no longer sweep over him, he is called a sage at peace. Then he says, Bhikkhu, bear in mind this brief exposition of the 6 elements. Okay, now we have to remember that all along the Buddha hasn't revealed his identity to the young man Pukkusāti. And so when they started the conversation, Pukkusāti thought, he's himself is one ascetic, here another ascetic has arrived, and they're just having a conversation. And probably, according to the commentary, the Buddha has sort of subdued his distinctive features, that what's called the 32 marks of the great man, and all of the 80 minor features of bodily excellence. And so maybe with a discerning eye, maybe one could see them, but the Buddha sort of deliberately sort of muffled them so that the young man would just take the Buddha to be another wandering ascetic. But now, as the Buddha was giving this discourse, probably it was occurring to Pukkusāti, could this be the Buddha himself? Could this be the Buddha himself? Then I think when the Buddha gave this exposition on Muni Santo, the sage at peace, then it fully dawned on him that this is the Blessed One, the Master, the Teacher, the Buddha. And so then the text says, the Venerable Pukkusāti thought, indeed the Teacher has come to me, the Sublime One has come to me, the fully enlightened One has come to me. And probably somehow we realized that the Buddha had come expressly to meet him there. At least that's the way it's phrased in the sutta. So just imagine, like, if you were traveling someplace and staying at a hotel or motel for the night, and then somebody checks in to the room next door and then comes to your room and says, can we start a little conversation? And so you have a little conversation, and then he starts speaking and explaining points of Dhamma. Then you realize, wow, this guy knows what he's talking about. Ah, it's the Buddha himself, wow. And he's come to this Best Western motel or Holiday Inn hotel just to see me. Okay, so then he gets up from his seat, he arranges his robe over one shoulder, and then he bows down at the Buddha's feet and says, he apologizes. If you remember at the beginning of the discourse, he was referring to the Buddha or addressing him by the word avuso, which is the word that fellow ascetics would use when they're addressing their peers. So here it's what's translated as friend. So actually it doesn't really mean friend, but it's just a polite term, a little bit respectful, but used between people roughly on the same level. And so when one is addressing one's master, one's spiritual master, one would use a different word, and the word that's used amongst the Buddhists is the word Bhante. And don't think that when you call me Bhante that you're putting me up on a high pedestal. Now Bhante has come just to mean a senior monk. But in the Buddha's day, it was generally used for the Buddha himself or for very senior elder disciples. And so now Pukkusāti bows down to the Buddha and apologizes for addressing him as avuso. And then he says, may the Blessed One forgive me this transgression for the sake of restraint in the future. Okay, then the Buddha says, this is a stock phrase or passage that comes whenever somebody apologizes to the Buddha. He says, I forgive you for it is growth in the Noble One's discipline when one sees one's transgression as such, makes amends for it, and undertakes restraint in the future. And now Pukkusāti, though he put on the robe himself, probably not the proper monastic robe, but just some pieces of cloth which he had dyed a saffron color and shaved his head. And so he's in a sense a renunciant, a monk, but he's not been ordained into the Buddha's monastic sangha yet. And so, but actually this is interesting, because here he says, I would receive full admission. This is upasampada under the Blessed One. Now when in other passages where there's a wandering ascetic who wants to be ordained under the Buddha, he asks for the going forth. Yeah, he wouldn't ask for the going forth because he's already gone forth, as an ascetic, but now he's asking to be admitted into the Bhikkhu Sangha. So he says, I would receive the full admission or full ordination under the Blessed One. And one of the requirements for ordination is to have, when one comes for ordination, to have the full set of monastic robes and alms bowl. And this is a little puzzling. The Buddha asks him, are your bowl and robes complete? And he says, Venerable Sir, my bowl and robes are not complete. I could see this with the case of the robes, but I would think that since he's been living as a wandering ascetic, he should have an alms bowl. Though maybe this is a stock phrase, and so he says, my robes and bowl are not complete. But it would seem to me that he should say, I have an alms bowl, but I don't have the set of robes. And so then the Buddha says, Tathagatas do not give the full admission to anyone whose bowl and robes are not complete. Now normally if somebody wants to ordain, they would have lay supporters, if they're like in a fixed residence, lay supporters who will provide the robes and the bowl, so then they just have to go to the ordination site and then they'll receive the ordination. But since Pukkusāti was traveling around, he was actually traveling a long distance in order to go see the Buddha, so he doesn't know anybody in this area where he's present now near Rajagaha. And so the Buddha says the Tathagatas do not give the ordination to anyone whose robes and bowl are not complete. And so Pukkusāti then has to go out and start inquiring and seeking, trying to find somebody to provide the robes and the bowl. And so the text says, then while the Venerable Pukkusāti was searching for a bowl and robes, a stray cow killed him. Strangely, this happens in a number of cases to those who are aspiring to become Buddhist monks when they go out seeking their robes and bowl. There's the case also, I'm thinking of Bahia in the Udana, Sutta number 10 in the Udana. Bahia was the one who came to the Buddha very with a strong sense of urgency, asking for a teaching, and then the Buddha gave him this very concise teaching. In the seen, there will be only what is seen. In the heard, only what is heard. In the sensed, only what is sensed. In what is cognized, only what is cognized. And when Bahia heard that, immediately he achieved arahantship. And then he wanted to become, he was also a wandering ascetic. He wanted to become a monk. The Buddha told him to get his bowl and robes. And when he went to seek the robes and the bowl, he was killed by a stray cow. Okay, so he's killed by the cow. And according to the commentary, when he was killed by the cow, then he fell over on a rubbish heap. Then word came and spread, through the neighborhood that this wandering ascetic was killed. And the word came and it reached King Bimbisara, and King Bimbisara came to see the person who was killed, the ascetic who was killed, and somehow realized that this was his old friend through correspondence, Pukkusāti, formerly the king of Takshila. And so King Bimbisara then arranged a proper cremation for him. Okay, then a number of monks come to the Buddha and they ask the Buddha, they tell the Buddha that the clansman Pukkusāti, who was given a brief instruction by the Blessed One, has died. What is his destination? What is his future course? Then the Buddha says that Pukkusāti practiced in accordance with the Dhamma. He did not trouble me in the interpretation of the Dhamma. With the destruction of the 5 lower fetters, the clansman Pukkusāti has been reborn spontaneously. That's in the pure abodes. And he will attain final Nibbana there without ever returning from that world. And I think I have a note that explains what Yeah, there's a verse in the Samyutta Nikaya. This is in the first chapter of the Samyutta Nikaya, Sutta number 50, which speaks about a number of disciples of the Buddha who had been reborn in the pure abode called the Aviha. And as soon as they were reborn in that celestial realm, they achieved final liberation. They became arahantship. They attained arahantship. The verse says that they cut off, as soon as they arose, they cut off all the fetters, both those relating to the human realm and those relating to the celestial realms, and now they are fully liberated in mind. But at the time of his death, according to the sutta, Pukkusāti, while listening to the Buddha, he must have, been contemplating and then developing insight on the basis of the Buddha's words. And even while listening, he would have cut off 5 fetters and become a non-returner. Okay, and that takes us to the end of the sutta. I wonder if that clock is correct, because my clock, 10 after, 11:10, so that's about 7 minutes fast. Okay, so we have some time if anybody has any questions or comments. Okay, Edwin and Richard. Yeah, I think this microphone is making a cracking sound, and then maybe if you speak loudly, yeah.
In the pure gold, it falls into the 24th to the 27th Orion, but it states here there is 16,000 eons, as you see in the Dharma. But it's stated that, of course, anyone that falls into that Orion would eventually, of course, become enlightened.
Yeah.
But it's so, when it says you will eventually, will be for how long? When it states here that it is 16,000 eons, that falls into that realm.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he did now become enlightened.
Yeah.
He fell into the material sphere.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. The point that Edwin is making is, I think the point is that he's been reborn in the Aviha pure abode. Okay. Immediately upon rebirth, he achieves arahantship, but the fixed lifespan in that pure abode is 16,000. 16,000 kalpas, or kalpas. These are aeons, and so it's still going to be a very long time until he achieves final nibbana. Is that your point? Yeah. That's the case. But my supposition is that the sense of time is relative to the consciousness in that realm. So there are these insects like the gnat, it's born and dies within a single day, but probably it has the consciousness of having like 100-year lifespan. So when it's born, it's like frolicking like a little child. When it's, this is maybe 6 a.m., it's frolicking like a child.
Meditation, you may see that happen.
Yeah.
Sit there, you realize an hour
Yeah. So 10 a.m., it's sort of in adolescence, going to school dances, looking for, if it's a male gnat, it's looking for female, for a girlfriend amongst the female gnats. By 1 p.m., it's settle down as a family. That by 3 p.m. it's struggling with the problems of old age, and by 6 p.m. it's dead. But it has a sense that, wow, I've lived a full lifespan. And maybe they talk, Thomas Nat, he lived till 8 p.m. Say, wow, how does he do it? Oh, he eats well, gets plenty of exercise. He doesn't drink or smoke. For them, it's like 1 day is 12 hours, it's 100 years. And so for us, when we think 16,000 aeons, wow, that's a long time. But for them, maybe 16,000, it's just like 180 years.
Maybe it was a message to practice in this life and achieve enlightenment in this life without losing 16,000
Yeah, the thing is the Buddha encourages disciples to go on and practice till they've reached the final stage in this life. But, there would be many who just reach the stage of the third stage of non-returner. Then they're going to be reborn in the pure abodes. And then they have this tremendously long lifespan. I said that Richard, I had called Richard previously. I think it's good if you stand up. Yeah, stand up and...
On page 1093,
Yeah.
paragraph 23, the light is used twice, and 24 is used once.
The what?
What I'm concerned about is the second usage on paragraph 23. If he feels a painful feeling, he understands it is impermanent.
Yeah.
There is no holding to it. There is no light.
Yeah, yeah.
But it would look to me like it should mean that, like, the word delight there should somehow mean something like either fear or dread.
Yeah, yeah,
Being that
yeah,
if he thinks it's going to continue
yeah,
forever, right, that should
yeah,
be
yeah, yeah, yeah,
like that's its real dukkha sense
yeah.
goes on. And so what I'm wondering about the word delight, because when you said, it is not agitated, you're saying that it came from a combination of the words of craving and fear.
Yeah,
And so what I'm thinking is, does the second delight,
yeah,
is that really using the fear
yeah,
sense,
yeah,
whereas the first delight and
yeah,
the third are using the craving sense?
yeah. Okay, I understand your point. I'm not sure that the text intends it in that way. I think what happens, you see, because this is, we call it the style of oral transmission, in that it's not always adapt stock phrases and nuance them in order to fit variations. But in oral transmission, one has to keep phrases fairly simple and consistent, even though when we look at a passage like this, from the standpoint of psychological analysis, we say that the natural reaction to a painful feeling isn't delight, but either dread or repulsion. But here I think it's just because of the method of oral transmission, where one takes one stock phrase and then repeats it for 3 cases, even though it is not fully applicable to one of those cases.
The same kind of thing that happens in ballads and things like Homer.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Rosy Fingered Dawn happens over and over.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
After that,
yeah, yeah. Did Johnny, did you have?
Actually, a question on the internet, but one classmate quote the note and answer that. The question is, does Bodhisattva equal to Arahant?
Yeah, it is.
Footnote.
Yeah, it is, yeah. It is, yeah. Okay, I think we'll break now for the lunch, and then come back here 12:20. Is that too soon? Or 12:30? What's easier? 12:30. Okay, I mean then you can have a more leisurely lunch. Okay, so we'll come back from 12:30 to 1. We could have further discussion. Okay, let us end with the sharing of the merits. Okay, I'll do the recitation. Don't worry about getting the sheets. Okay, so we share the merits with the devas, the bhutas, the nagas. Akasata chabhumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu sasanang. Akasata chabhumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu desanang. Akasata chabhumata Deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu mang parang. Etavatacham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe devanumodantu sabbe bhutanumodantu sabbe satanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya Pavagupadaya avici hetato etantare satakayupapana rupya rupicha asanya sanyino dukkha pamuchantu pusantu nibuting. Okay, we end with 3 half bows to the Buddha. Okay, 1, 2, 3.